We are Rogue Media Sports.
Start clean with Clorox, because Clorox delivers a powerful clean every time. Because messes happen. Because I need the charcoal mask. Great, because why would I put that on my face when I could drop it in my sink? This is what I get for multitasking. Ugh, why is charcoal so sticky?
Hello?
Hey, Janice. I am so sorry. I thought I was on mute. No, we don't need to reschedule. I'll just stay off camera. Ooh, yeah, that happens. So start clean with Clorox. Use Clorox products as directed.
Hey, it's Mark Goodman.
And I'm Alan Light.
On today's podcast, Record Store Day founder Carrie Colleton is joining us to discuss the April 20th RSD special releases.
Plus, we'll talk live with our audience, the Sound Up Pod Squad, and find out who still listens to vinyl. And some updates from the Beatles universe.
Oh, good. Sound Up with Mark Goodman and Alan Light, the only music podcast that matters. Get it on Pandora, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
It is another edition of the Doomsday Podcast, and so pleased to have Ed Werner joining us from the greater Denver area, where Ed is preparing for a little Monday Night Football, part of, as we told you last week, Westwood One has gotten him involved, and so he'll be there at Monday Night Football. But Ed, you were zeroed in on this Cowboys game. And as we get going tonight, we got a lot to get to. But what was your viewing situation like there in Denver, Ed? I mean, I would love to, or Fort Collins, wherever you chose to be. I'd love to kind of hear about how you were able to consume this ball game.
Well, I watched the entire game on television and was able to break away from Little Henry to really focus in on the second half.
That's your grandson.
That's my grandson.
Yeah.
And he allowed me to watch the second half uninterrupted. And then once the game was over, I reached out to, I think, 5 coaches on one side or the other, Giants or Cowboys, and was able to get some insights on how they perceived the game and what the turning points were and, what created the outcome that we saw. And I think for the Giants, the defense did what it did for the most part last year. I mean, it gave them every chance to win the game. They took away Dez Bryant. He 2 catches, 43 yards. Zeke Elliott rushed for 104 yards, but had no rush more than 10. But they just, couldn't get Dak Prescott to make a mistake. He threw 39 passes without an interception, almost never puts the ball in jeopardy. And to me, that was the difference in the game. I mean, this is a team that the Cowboys couldn't beat last year when they went 13-3. They lost to the Giants twice. So Dak starts his second NFL season doing something he didn't in his amazing first year. He beat the Giants.
Yes, and that was kind of a nice breakthrough moment for him. And I tell you what, Ed, I'm real. I know you're bursting at the seams, and I want to start tapping into some of this information you've somehow gathered late into this evening. Not easy to get a hold of these folks when it is getting close to midnight here in Dallas. But, Ed, before you start unloading and unpacking all that we have and all our analysis and opinions and thoughts on this 19-3 victory for the Cowboys, I want to ask our fearless producer, Mark Friedman, to play the music, please. And it is that Doomsday Podcast. So excited to start actually reacting to real, genuine NFL football games. Cowboys 19-3 winners this evening, and we're taping this thing late, approaching midnight in Dallas. But lots to get to, lots coming from the Cowboys locker room, and Jerry has talked. And Ed, I want to start right there. There were 2 different things that happened. I do think, and it's always a little uncomfortable when we know what Zeke has been facing with this court. We know what he's been accused of, and we know it's hanging out there. And there's Jerry, as only Jerry could after the game, basically telling reporters, we knew this could be an inspiration to the team, and certainly the fact that the court ruling came down, and who knows what will happen down the road. There's still a good chance that sometime he'll miss 6 games, but for now, it looks like he'll get to play this season, and it was an inspired performance from Zeke. And I'll say this to you, Ed, I think on the other side, the air was let out of the sails of the Giants. Opening night, the excitement around the team, and you have Odell Beckham Jr. out there testing that ankle, and he just could not explode off of it and didn't have what he needed to go. Ed, in that moment that you found out, about an hour and a half before the ball game, that Zeke was not going to go, did you just almost immediately think, okay, Cowboys win this game?
You mean Odell Beckham Jr. wasn't going to go?
Certainly, I mean that.
Okay. So, Odell Beckham Jr. is obviously essential to the Giants, who, really struggle to create points and big plays, even with him in the lineup. But now in the 2 games that he's missed since he became a Giants starter, they've been outscored 68-20. And talking to some of the Cowboys coaches, they felt like once Odell Beckham Jr. was out of the game, they were able to adjust their coverage and focus on Brandon Marshall instead. Obviously, Brandon Marshall, the new acquisition to the Giants offense this offseason, big physical type receiver, didn't catch a pass from Eli Manning until 11 seconds were left in the game, was largely ignored. And according to the Cowboys coaches I talked to, it was because they made him their second priority and took him out of the game with their coverage plan once they knew Odell Beckham Jr. was out of the game. And, keep in mind, Brandon Marshall stated several things that caused him to put the Giants at the top of his list of teams that he wanted to play for. And one of those top 4 things was he wanted a dominant number 1 receiver on the opposite side of him. He wanted Odell Beckham Jr. because he knows at this stage in his career, he needs a guy to draw double coverage for him to create opportunities for himself away from that player. And with Odell Beckham Jr. out of the game, I just don't think Brandon Marshall was able to do that. Their inability to get him the ball early in the game seemed to have an effect on him psychologically. And so the Giants really were left with no weapons whatsoever. I mean, we talked about this. I think the Giants' offensive line is a huge liability. Their inability to run the football comes from that. And Eli Manning looked like a very frustrated player. I think he felt the rush an awful lot. And I think I said last week I wouldn't be surprised, as mediocre as the Cowboys front seems, they have enough depth and enough good players that they really could they could look like the 85 Bears compared to with the Giants trying to block them, and I think that's what happened.
Yeah, we wondered about that. What would win out? And the Giants, appear to have a pretty salty defense, and then they did. The Cowboys obviously didn't break out and score a ton, but they were able to kind of take the air out of the ball late. And talking about the Cowboys defense, and we wondered, okay, who is going to apply the pressure? Where's the pass rush going to come from? And at least for one night, and I know there's some other nice performances we can talk about, but DeMarcus Lawrence, what a great sign for the Cowboys. That a player that they were excited about when they drafted him in the second round. Obviously, last year he started the season suspended for 4 games, and honestly, you kind of got the feeling, okay, will he be going somewhere else in free agency? For one night, he was a load, and now part of that might have been, the player Hart over at right tackle. Serious problems for the Giants. Eric Flowers held up okay in the first half, really struggled some in the second half. As you said, bad offensive line, but still, to see a Cowboys defensive lineman, especially an edge rusher, dominate a game. Ed, this is not something we can point to a lot over the years. It's been a while. We got used to it with DeMarcus Ware, but since his departure, there really hasn't been a lot of that. And to see, I almost kind of forgot what that felt like, and Eli just did not have much of a chance in this game.
Yeah, Manning was sacked 3 times by a 4-man rush and threw an interception in another situation where the Cowboys didn't have to blitz. And I think it's really encouraging what we saw from DeMarcus Lawrence, because last year he had 1 sack. He had 2 in this game and 3 tackles for loss. So clearly he was dominating at his position. And, it's important that they have an edge rusher until DeMontre Moore comes back and until, David Irving comes back from suspension. I think Moore's got 1 more game. Irving's got 3 more games. But Lawrence is a guy they need to be a great player, or at least a very good player. If they're going to have any kind of defensive success this year up front, he's got to be a part of that, because he's the most acclaimed guy that they have in that front 4. So if he can continue to produce like that and can prove that it wasn't just going up against a weak tackle or a weak offensive line, then maybe the Cowboys defense will be significantly better than we originally projected.
Yeah, I think that that could be the case. Certainly a nice play by Brown late in the game, a guy that, just kind of dropped in out of nowhere and has become a very nice player for the Cowboys. Talking about Anthony Brown, of course, and that was an interesting play because the Lewis Jr., the Giants receiver, kind of came back in. This was late in the game, or about when the Giants had a tiny bit of a chance, fairly late in the game there, and Anthony Brown comes in, makes the interception, and those are the kind of plays you just have not seen from this Cowboys defense much in the past. To get that kind of takeaway, just really, really big for this team. And then, Ed, we'll stay with the defense for a minute. We're not surprised to see Sean Lee have 8 tackles, be all over the field. He continues to be, the best player on this defense, or at least the most consistent player, game in, game out. But Jaylon Smith, to see number 54 out there, had a big setback. This defense did, with Hitchens going out and going to be out for at least 6-7 weeks probably. And there was Jaylon Smith in there, the former second-round pick. And what a moment it had to be. We talked a lot about him finally getting into the preseason, but a regular season game. And Ed, I thought he reacted well. What you look for is he a step slow? How does he react? And he finishes second only to Sean Lee, the guy who always leads in tackles, with 7 tackles, and thought he was incredibly active. And I think you even saw in coverage, Eli was trying to get rid of the ball, and man, he wasn't really taking advantage. That Evan Ingram may end up being a really nice tight end for them, but he was having to fit it in on those 3-4 yard shots, even to Shepard. He didn't get to the sticks in a 3rd and 4 situation. He throws it 2 yards in front of him just because he didn't have much time. Thought Jaylon Smith very, very encouraging for the Cowboys to see him come out of that game and really make a nice impact.
Right. I think when, the Cowboys have endured a lot of criticism, some of it from me, for spending a second-round pick on Jaylon Smith. Had he not been injured and had that ACL tear in his final game at Notre Dame and suffered the nerve damage that further delayed his return, to the point that, quite honestly, some people in the NFL doubted this moment would ever occur. But the Cowboys believed, their doctor, Dan Cooper, did the surgery, so they had a little inside knowledge here. And they believed that Jaylon Smith was going to have a 10-year career. They just didn't know when it was going to start. Well, Sunday night, week 1 against the Giants, it started, and in rather spectacular fashion, because I would say it was borderline whether he caused a fumble, that should have been called. It was ruled the player was down before Jaylon Smith knocked the ball loose. But not only was he there to create that potential play, but the Anthony Brown interception you mentioned, he was right there on that play as well. And, I think the Cowboys, maybe if this continues, maybe they'll be justified in thinking that Sean Lee and Jaylon Smith can challenge Carolina's, great tandem, Luke Kuechly and Thomas Davis, for, best linebacker tandem in the NFL right now. Obviously, those guys have been doing it for a few years. But, yeah, Jaylon Smith, I thought he moved exceptionally well. I thought he was really involved. It seemed like he took a lot of snaps. I know they wanted to share the position with him to reduce, the stress they put him under physically. But I thought he held up remarkably well. Now, the Giants don't really have much of a run game, and they really don't have a speed back who can come out of the backfield and go vertical down the field. And that's where I think some people in the league believe Jaylon Smith could potentially be exposed. Now, that could happen next week because the Broncos do have Jamal Charles.
Yeah, and Jamal Charles obviously has had some huge days in this league and still can be very effective. And again, you will be there. You'll be right in the middle of that game. You're a man that spent a lot of your life in Colorado, and so there you are covering Monday night, and then you'll be right back there in the middle of that Cowboys-Broncos game. And the Doomsday Podcast, happy to have you there. Now, I want to get to a couple of interesting Jerry Jones quotes, and I'll do it right now, by the way, Ed. Some of those quotes are coming out to us that Jerry was just, he likes to hold court outside the Cowboys locker room. And this was Jerry on the play of linebacker Jaylon Smith, said, well, we had Durant sitting over there and ready to go. Jaylon just kept going. Again, when you look at several of the younger players that really distinguish themselves in the game, he'll be right at the top of the list. I'm really proud for him. And he made some big plays for us out there. I'm happy for him. Boy, I find this all interesting, Ed, because one of the things that Stephen Jones has talked about over and over, we cannot leave him out there for this number of snaps. Now, fortunately, the Giants just didn't get a ton of offensive snaps, but to be able to basically leave him out there and go, hey, we like how you're playing, we're going to leave you out there and let you go. That had to make the Cowboys feel great, and honestly, they may have to sort of monitor themselves in terms of not pushing him too much as they become more and more comfortable with having him in the lineup.
Well, it's interesting that right away in his first game he becomes a guy that they can't get off the field. Right? They don't feel good about taking him out of the game, even though, as you said, Stephen Jones indicated previously that their need for a middle linebacker with the Anthony Hitchens injury was not going to create a situation where they jeopardized Jaylon Smith's health, and that they were going to continue their plan to bring him along slowly. And I think the plan was to, play him in run situations, first and second down run situations, and then let Durant come in on third downs and pass situations. But there really weren't very many of those that materialized, and it'll be interesting to see. Once we get the coaches to total up the plays, it'll be interesting to see exactly how many snaps Jaylon Smith played and what percentage of the defensive snaps that ultimately was.
All right, Ed, I'm very pleased to tell you more and more folks are wanting to partner with Doomsday. We welcome that, especially, we only partner with things we believe in. And I will say this, Harry's Razors, I've used Harry's razors for a pretty good while now, at least 2-3 years. And Ed, you've seen me. I'm a man who can cut my skin pretty easily. And one of the great things about Harry's is that German engineering. Well, the Germans, they make good cars. They make excellent razors. 100 years of blade making experience to ensure the highest quality. All products are backed by 100% quality guarantee. Harry's offers their blades at half the price of the leading 5-blade razor selling directly to you over the internet, and you can claim your free trial offer from Harry's today. $13 value for free when you sign up, just covers shipping. Your free trial set includes a weighted ergonomic razor handle, 5 precision-engineered blades with a lubricating strip and trimmer blade. Ooh, you'll love that, Ed, that trimmer blade for that mustache you have. Rich lathering shave gel and a travel blade cover. To get your free trial, all you got to do, go to harrys.com/doomsday. Right now, that's harrys.com/doomsday. Ed, how do you keep that that beard or that mustache trimmed? And I know from time to time you'll even maybe try to go with the goatee. Are you kind of excited about maybe giving this Harry's a try?
One of the reasons that I went with not only a mustache but a goatee was because I just no longer trusted some of the other products on the market that I could, as I age, safely work around my mouth in a way that would keep me uninjured. And so maybe now I can get rid of the goatee and just go back to the mustache look.
I think you can. And again, get your free trial set. Go to harrys.com/doomsday. That's harrys.com/doomsday. Ed, you're like me. You just kind of, you're fair-skinned guy. And
otherwise, I'm really not like you at all. But go ahead.
We share more in common than you would like to admit, but I do think you're going to love these Harry's razors. And boy, thank you, Harry's. I want to welcome you aboard as more and more people want to take part and partner with Doomsday. We're very thankful to have you along. Now, as we continue to look at this Cowboys game, let's flip over, Ed, and look. You mentioned it right at the top of the podcast in terms of what Dak did. I think Dak's getting more and more comfortable, by the way, knowing when it's time to take off and run. And you saw that was late in the first half. I thought there was one. He could have taken a shot. Jenkins was headhunting. Jenkins came up there saying, okay, you want to run? I'm gonna lower this shoulder and give you something to remember. And Dak was elusive enough. That's just one part, by the way. I mean, Tony Romo had a really nice career here, but by the end of his career, he could move. He could still move and still use the pirouette move, but he certainly couldn't take off and get downfield like Dak did. I thought that was impressive. And just so you know, Zeke coming out here, and Frito, I want to double check with you. Frito, our fearless producer, is here. This is from what Zeke said tonight. Interesting quotes. I've been looking at some of these quotes from Zeke, and Ed, I want you to get you to react to this. Zeke in the locker room saying, I'll finally get a fair trial, finally get a chance to prove my innocence. And what's interesting is this is not I don't know if he'll ever get that chance. I mean, they didn't file charges, so it's not going to – what'll be adjudicated at some point is, did Roger Goodell have the right to do this? And generally what we've seen is when you look at the CBA, the answer is yes, he did. So I don't know – I don't totally know what Zeke's talking about when he says he's going to get a chance to prove my innocence. He may get to continue to prove that the NFL botched this investigation, but I don't think in the public eye, and certainly not in the courtroom, are we ever going to completely clear Zeke Elliott.
Well, the next step in all of this is, that the NFL, it's expected as soon as tomorrow, is going to go to federal court and appeal in a much more favorable jurisdiction, taking this case outside of Texas, where obviously Zeke Elliott won a favorable ruling that allowed him to play not only in this game on Sunday night against the Giants, but many presume for the duration of the season, given it takes federal court on average nearly 9 months to adjudicate. However, that being said, the next – nothing is guaranteed at this point. I think Zeke acknowledges that. There's no guarantee he's going to be playing in Denver this week. I think that's the expectation is that he'll play. But the federal court could overrule the judge's decision in Dallas and reinstate the suspension. And you're right. This isn't really about proving Zeke Elliott's guilt or innocence anymore. Regarding the domestic violence allegations made against him by his former girlfriend, Tiffany Thompson. This is really about determining whether the NFL has followed its own unilaterally imposed process for investigating and punishing in these situations. And the most recent decision obviously confirmed in Judge Mazant's mind that the NFLPA is right in that this was poorly done. Largely because the lead investigator was not in the room when the punishment phase was discussed. And so there's no assurance that Roger Goodell knew that she felt like he did not merit punishment based on the lack of credibility she gave the main witness against Zeke Elliott. So we'll see where all this goes. But you're right. This is really not about determining his guilt or innocence anymore of the charges. It's now about whether Commissioner Goodell, in imposing the 6-game suspension, operated outside the bounds of the CBA.
And Jerry Jones, by the way, was quoted saying directly, I alluded to this earlier, but here's the actual quote. Although he was talking about Zeke, although he was playing in this game no matter what, the idea that we could have him for an extended period of time was certainly inspirational. And I do think this team, and I think they were ready, And, Alfred Morris was the Darren McFadden not even active in tonight's game. It was Alfred Morris. And, Ed, I think probably it was to this team. And we alluded to this. I think, and I've been talking about this today to various folks that I've talked to on radio shows and that kind of thing. I think Zeke has to, if he's somewhat in touch with what's going on, has to realize, okay, no matter how much I think I might be innocent or whatever, I did bring this on myself. I brought this on my team. This has been an enormous distraction, and so I do think that he went out there tonight with a purpose. And I kept being asked, and I know you're asked these things when you do interviews, is he going to be a distraction? Is it going to be? And quite honestly, once you get out there, I just don't think you're like, oh my gosh, I forgot how to do this. I forgot how to run. He played in one of those preseason games. He was ready to go, and I think it was important to him and Dak. They had those 2 losses last year, both to the Giants, and that was big. Those were big. I think this was something they wanted to get past, and to go out there and thoroughly dominate a team and to win 19-3, and even against a really stiff Giants defense, I think they have to feel really good about what they did.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question about it, but they did only score 1 touchdown. I think there were some new things that we saw in the offense from Scott Linehan, beyond not giving Zeke Elliott a touch when they had 1st and goal at the 3 and throwing 3 straight incompletions to Des Bryant instead. Beyond that, I thought there were some. You mentioned Dak running the football. Well, he ran 3 times for 24 yards, including a 17-yarder. And that's part of what he brings. He's going to put pressure on a defense in a unique way. And I think they played off some of that, too, with a lot of the read option type stuff they did with a slant to either Des Bryant or on the touchdown pass to Jason Witten, a tight end running a slant behind that play action. And that really produced the only touchdown of the game. And if you watch that play, it was an incredible play fake between the quarterback and the running back. It really looked like Zeke Elliott took the ball in its entirety from the quarterback, but Dak pulled it out of his gut and threw it quickly behind him for a touchdown on Eli Apple to Jason Witten.
Yeah, and I thought one of the main battles that was going to take place was Janoris Jenkins, nice cornerback. I thought he played pretty well tonight, and obviously Dez just had 3 catches, 45 yards, like 33 or 34 of those yards came on one play. Thought that was a really nice battle. Thought a tough time for the Giants. I'm not saying and it kind of set up, I believe it set up that Witten touchdown was a call on Jenkins, and that's a tough. They do in this league, wide receivers and the offense really are favored. But when you see 2 players of that magnitude and that athleticism basically battling each other step for step down the field, boy, that's a really, really tough call that the Giants got right there, and that ended up being a big play in the ball game in what had been, a fairly tight game to that point.
Yeah, well, it did play a role in what produced the only touchdown of the game, so it was part of that same drive. Certainly, that was very questionable. If you look at some of the other plays that didn't draw a flag, like Jimmy Graham seemingly getting mugged by 2 defenders. Green Bay defenders in the end zone, and for that not to draw a flag, and for this Des Bryant play to draw a flag. But I think they were trying to keep it somewhat even. They do let a lot go for Janoris Jenkins. He does get a lot. He does get away with some contact down the field that less accomplished cornerbacks might get flagged for. So I think it was a fairly evenly called game from the point of view of that particular matchup.
And I did want to say, was looking this as we speak here, but the Coach McAdoo, some interesting comments after the game, and this was getting a lot of attention in New York as we speak. Ben McAdoo. By the way, what'd you think of his hair? I kind of liked that swept back Gordon Gekko look that he had. Looked like he
Where's
had
the
quite a bit of
ginormous
product.
play sheet? What happened to the ginormous play sheet he used to have?
I don't know. I missed that. But the hair, I mean, that is a lot of gel that he put in there. Now, back kind of in your high school days, you would call that, I think, Dipsy Do is what people use to put in their hair.
Bro Cream, Vitalis. Yeah, I'm familiar with it.
Yeah, all of those things. You still have a nice head of hair. I don't know if you use a product or not, Ed, but Ben McAdoo, extremely critical of his offense, called the offense, quote, very disappointing, and then said no part of the offense was functional. And that's, of course, the big quote that's getting a lot of attention. And I think for a coach that made his reputation on being a play caller and came up, that's what he's going to take the hardest. The defense was out there way too long. And they honestly stood up and, as you said, gave up one touchdown. So let's not act like it was a horrible performance by that defense. The offense against the Cowboys defense that is not a heralded defense to put up 3 points, extremely disappointing. And I do think a big part of it was the field position. Jason Garrett alluded to that. The Cowboys just kept pinning them back there inside the 10-yard line over and over, and it just seemed like Eli could get nothing going. And one thing I always remember, and you remember this about Coughlin, and he sort of got this from Parcells. Even if you're down 16-0 at halftime, you got to at some point try to get a foothold in the game, and you have to make the other team respect the run game, and boy, McAdoo does not seem to want to do that. Part of it, they're not that talented at running back, but Darkwa, 3 carries, and then Perkins, 7 carries. That's it. Shepard had had one touch for about 6 yards, but they had no running game. And boy, if a team can make you completely one-dimensional, especially when you don't have OBJ out there, they just turned into a team that looked really listless and had nowhere to go.
But this is nothing new, and his condemnation using that description of his offensive performance is really an indictment of himself because.
Correct.
As you mentioned, he's the play caller. He's the one who organizes the offense, sets the game plan, runs the practices, calls the plays. And this is not a new development. I mean, this is the 7th straight game the Giants have failed to score at least 20 points in a game. It's an offensive league. Everybody scores more points than that on a regular basis. And I think the other thing that, you're right. I think the Cowboys were smart about it because if you're going to play an incompetent offensive group, then just don't give them anything cheap. And so pin them back and make them like it's hard for any offense other than the Chiefs against the Patriots to go 90 yards for a touchdown. The Chiefs did it 3 times the other night. But most teams will do that once or twice an entire season. So, if you constantly provide them poor field position using your special teams like the Cowboys did, and you have a quarterback who just doesn't turn the ball over and is never going to give the Giants a short field, then you're going to win convincingly like the Cowboys did, even though you don't generate a whole lot of offense yourself.
No, I'm with you, and now I do not think, you can't the rest of the season you can't rely on the defense to hold teams down like that. But it's going to be. I thought it was a great start, and it's something to build on. Now, Ed, you and I are always kind of taking a long look at these injuries after games, and a player who had a great training camp when we were out there, just very competitive. I sort of had a swagger back, and I'm talking about Orlando Scandrick. The word on him did look like a broken hand, and he is Jerry. Jerry's always quick to kind of give his diagnosis. Really believes he could come back quickly and not miss any time. But now Ed is, as anybody knows, that's a difficult position to play. He may still have his speed, but you need to be able to poke your hands in there and try to break up passes. And so that's something we'll be taking a pretty close look at heading into next week.
Well, and we already know that the cornerback position is a liability for them just because of the changes that they made in the offseason. I think Orlando Scandrick is still their best corner, whether he's playing outside or he's playing in the slot. Some people might argue that Anthony Brown, who had the interception, the 6th-round pick last year, played well when Scandrick was injured as a rookie. has surpassed him already, but that's not the way they lined up. So I'm going to give deference to the coaches on that and believe that Skandrick is still their best player now. Jordan Lewis, their third-round pick, and Cheeto Awuzie, who played some and had an ankle injury in the game, are guys who should improve as they get experience early in the season. Darren Woodson was one of those guys saying, hey, look, I think these guys have the talent that if they get enough experience during the course of the season, by the end of the year, they should be better than Brandon Carr and Morris Claiborne were at the cornerback positions. But early in the season, they really can't afford to lose in Orlando Skandrick. And I guess the diagnosis is he's a fractured left hand. He's going to have surgery. They don't know yet if he'll miss any games. Apparently they expect it would be just a couple of games, if any at all, but they're going to have to get Lewis and Awuzie going if he's out of the game for the next couple of weeks.
Back on the offensive side, it was good, by the way, to see Awuzie, a guy from your part of the country, from CU, who from Colorado, who went in there and it did okay. Seemed to be fine and not be overwhelmed by the moment. One player that really came up big for the Cowboys with Dez not having a big game was Terrence Williams, who got banged up a little bit, hurt his ankle, and then somehow was able to make some of those critical plays. You talked yourself, Ed, about maybe Linehan doing a couple of different things, whether that was Dak his willingness to run a little bit more, but also getting the ball on one of those, what we like to call those, Ed, smoke screens, getting the ball out in the flat to Terrence Williams, letting him run with the ball, obviously has some good speed. Chaz Green, some of those linemen getting out in front of him, making plays. I thought Terrence Williams, at a time when the Cowboys really needed to get something going, was a spark for this offense, especially in the first half.
Yeah, he wound up being their, leading receiver in terms of receptions and yards. And, Bryce Butler made a big play, too, to get him in scoring position for their first points of the game. That ill-fated series that ended up with the 3 incompletions from the 3-yard line and the leading rusher in football from last year, a guy who scored 15 touchdowns, not getting a single handoff, which was a questionable sequence of events. But yeah, I thought they did a good job working around the fact that they didn't have Dez Bryant creating any kind of consistent offense for them, and just made the one big play that really never amounted to much of anything. And like we said before, Elliott never broke any really long runs. He had a 30-yard catch, but really that was when they were trying to close it out too. So I thought they did a good job against a tough defense, one that thwarted them twice last year, and they did it without some of their star players, being terribly productive. So credit to them to find another way to win.
All right, I want to talk about our favorite Razor for a moment, but I do want you to be thinking about something. I got a Chris Collinsworth. I need you to put I'm not going to have you try to do any media criticism. Leave that to me. But I. Because, you're getting back in the game. Westwood won. You're going to be heard on this Monday Night Football and all that. But I do want your thought, because there were some opinions about how NBC handled the Zeke thing. And I know you were listening and observing the game, and I want to get your thoughts on that. But first, Ed, Harry's Razors, thank you so much for coming over to Doomsday and partnering with us. Harry's is so confident you're going to love their blades. They'll give you their trial shave set for free when you sign up at harrys.com/doomsday. Just pay for shipping. And, Ed, one of the things, I'm I'm a sensitive man. I've got sensitive skin. They have their own German factory with over 100 years of blade making experience to ensure the highest quality. All products are backed by 100% quality guarantee. And that 5-blade razor. Now, listen, we've all been tricked into this. Oh my gosh, we got the Quattro, we got the Quintuple, we got this many. These things are wonderful, and the ergonomic razor handle. Ed, when you shave, you want to have something that feels right in your hand. Okay? That applies to a lot of things in life. Rich lathering shave gel, a travel blade cover, Frito's shaking his head at me. And to get your free trial set, go to harrys.com/doomsday right now. That's harrys.com/doomsday. Ed, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the good folks at Harry's to and we got to decide, you're in Colorado so much, it's hard to know where to send these razors. You want me to send those to your Dallas estate or your Flower Mound estate, or you want me to send those to Colorado?
You can stop naming all the cities I either live in or used to live in anytime you want to. The security people here are just going nuts about this whole problem you're creating for them. We can talk about that part of it off the air, but I will say that as it relates to Harry's blades and my need for them, I was just thinking today when I got out of the shower, geez, I haven't shaved in a few days, and I gotta cover a game tomorrow. And then I thought, but I'm working in radio, not TV. I really don't ever need to shave again if I don't want to. So I think Harry's has got to be really good for me to want to shave at all. So if you see me and I just have a goatee and a mustache, you know that Harry's blades are doing the trick.
and I do want another guy that he'll throw down a 5 o'clock shadow on you. You know, our producer Mark Friedman wants to weigh in on this.
Ed, I was just wondering if you can go ahead and just give Matt your address so he'll know exactly where to send those razors.
I'll just give him both addresses and he can send half the shipment to each. How's that?
I like that. I want Harry's razors waiting on you wherever you are. Get the free trial set. Go to harrys.com/doomsday immediately. harrys.com/doomsday. Okay, Ed, as we go late in the evening, fortunately you are on Mountain Time right now, and that
there he goes, giving away my whereabouts again,
buddy. We know you're going to call that game tomorrow night. We can't be.
You can fly from Dallas to Denver in 15 minutes. It's like 640 miles.
We need to avoid all the secrecy that you're trying to. I'm not going to give your hotel, other than we'll say you like Marriott properties. Okay, Ed, I do want to say this though. The NBC broadcast. Now, I didn't get to, I'm at the ball game, and so I was kind of getting to see it up there on the monitors, but I didn't get to hear it. And what I'm told is Chris Collinsworth said something along the lines of, there's been a lot going on with Zeke Elliott, but tonight we're just going to kind of focus on Zeke Elliott, the player. Are you, you're a long time, you're a news hound. I mean, you're on the trail, you're trying to get all this scoop. Were you okay with that approach, or were you a little taken aback that it was so, hey, I know there's a bunch of stuff going on, but we're not really going to handle it on air?
Well, I don't really think it's fair to the viewers because, they may not have an understanding of what's happened with Elliott over the course of the entire offseason. And I'm not saying you need to go into it in great detail for a national audience, but let's acknowledge the fact that 48 hours before the game, a key courtroom decision basically allowed him to be in uniform and on your television screen in this game. And there's likely to be more court hearings that will determine whether he continues to play in that capacity. And so I disagree with, hey, let's just pretend nothing's gone on and he's just a football player like all these other football players are. He's not. And that's not the situation. And ultimately, to his credit, and I don't mean to be overly critical of Chris Collinsworth. He's been doing this for a long time. He's a color analyst. He's a former player. He's not, a journalist like a reporter in that capacity. But Al Michaels eventually did come back to it and did explain to some degree, give a basic understanding of what Elliott's situation was relative to, a suspension and court ruling. So ultimately, I think they handled it the right way. I don't think the right way was to pretend with your viewers that Elliott and Dak Prescott are in the same identical situation.
I agree with you. I think you can't take the approach that you're just not going to really. I think Fredo disagrees with us. He loved how I don't know why he's been so supportive of Chris Collinsworth, but he has, and he thinks they handled it fine. Now, Ed, as we kind of looked around the league today and studied some of these other games, I obviously, because of for NFC East reasons, took a long look at that the Redskins and the Eagles. Eagles defense coming up big late, and boy, Cousins just never really could get anything going. And I think there's some concerns in terms of their weapons. They really, some of them, they didn't make great plays for him, and then, of course, some big-time mistakes. What across the league, Ed, grabbed your attention as you were watching some games today?
Well, I watched the Raiders go into Tennessee, and despite concerns about the quality of their defense, I thought they put together really a three-phase victory on the road against another really good team in beating the Tennessee Titans. So I think that says a lot about the Raiders and their ability if they, unless they're decimated by injury and lose their quarterback like they did last year late in the year. I think that's a team that has Super Bowl potential. And then I think two teams that fit that same description in the NFC played against each other at Lambeau Field, and Seattle looked really pathetic on offense. They were kind of like the Giants tonight against the Cowboys. They had that kind of look to them. Like, how is this team ever going to create any points? Their defense was overwhelming. It was fantastic. They sacked Aaron Rodgers, 4 times. They had a defensive touchdown negated by what both Mike Pereira and Dean Blandino, the two former supervisor of officials for the NFL, thought were, atrociously wrong calls, denied Seattle a defensive touchdown against Rodgers and the Packers. But I thought the Packers looked reasonably good. They weren't as explosive as you would think, but I have a little trepidation about both those teams because of what we saw on the offensive line. Saw their quarterbacks taking way too much punishment and being forced to take hits to get rid of the football in ways that were not by offensive design by any means.
Are you amused by the way, Pereira just has that really distinguished look? I mean, he's the guy who created this role, the officials on TV that everybody's now trying to emulate, and he just has a very distinguished. He's great. He's a good-looking dude, and he's just a guy. He dresses up nice. Does Blandino
and to his credit, despite his relationships in the league office and his history there, he doesn't sugarcoat his criticism of them. I mean, I think he's very objective about what he sees, and he's been willing to openly criticize the NFL, even in situations where it didn't involve just watching a replay and some official getting it wrong.
No, I like him, and I'm amused by his new sidekick, Blandino. I'm amused by the way he dresses. It's a totally different look than Pereira. He likes the sort of the light. I mean, he really sort of dresses for the spring at all times. And I don't know, for some reason, he sort of reminds me of like a non-denominational preacher.
Okay. He's in the process of transitioning into a more visible role. I know he did the weekly thing on NFL Network when he was the supervisor of officials, and criticism of him was he was never really an official himself. So they don't have that situation in the league office anymore. But let's see where it goes. I think he's going to be an effective communicator in this new role. I'm not really sure why Fox needs 2 of these guys, but we got full-time officials now, so it seems like the quality of officiating should somehow improve, although I'm not sure that was the outcome from week 1. Do we really need 2 former supervisor of officials to, question the calls and interpret the decisions that these guys are making on a weekly basis?
Were you watching that one game today, speaking of that, where Pereira jumped in there, and I agreed with him that the pass was coming forward on that
That was the game you were talking about, the Redskins game, right?
Yeah, was that the one where Cousins was trying to say the pass was coming forward? Anyway, it's interesting to me that you can go to MLB started doing this. Okay, now we're going to go to New York and we're going to have this sort of broadcast central, and whoever this new supervisor's hanging out there. And I thought they still got it wrong. I mean, it was a major call in that game, and it looked like by the rule of the hand was moving forward, and I didn't think it was that hard of a call, and they didn't get it. So anyway, by the way, I heard our old buddy Sal Palantonio today, and he is much like what you're going to be doing. Sal's a guy who loves kind of that spread up in the press box usually. He was down on the sideline doing some radio sideline work, Ed, and he sounded good. I thought he did a good job. And, of course, who was up in the booth? Your hero, Polian. And he was beating everybody down just because I don't know who was doing the play-by-play, but Polian just would not stop talking. But I thought Sal Pal did a nice job.
You've always been a big Sal Pal guy.
I am, and I know you are too. And I like.
I just don't like your criticism of Bill Polian. I think it's completely unfounded.
I really think that I'm not even going to go there. You're already mad at me that my Blandino comments, but
exactly.
I will just.
I'm glad you could trace my anger back to the right moment.
There shouldn't be any anger. I don't have any problem with non-denominational pastors. I would like them to go ahead and pick a denomination, but I'm just saying everyone that I grew up seeing kind of had that same look. But Ed, it's really been a terrific evening. Thank you for staying up late. And the Doomsday Podcast, all our partners, more and more coming this direction. Final thoughts this evening, Ed, on a Cowboys 19-3 victory over the Giants, and Dak sort of getting over the hump after those 2 losses to the Giants last year.
Well, I thought that Dak Prescott got off to a great start on year 2. Most people think that, and Wade Wilson confirmed this when we talked to him at training camp. He's one of those who believes that a quarterback makes his biggest jump in terms of improvement from year 1 to year 2. And while he struggled early in the game, he certainly remained patient. He didn't force throws. He didn't overreact. He always seemed very poised and in command. And I think that's all very encouraging. And I'll be at this game tomorrow night watching Denver and San Diego, and being very mindful of the fact that the Broncos are the Cowboys' next opponent here in Denver, and I'll hopefully have some unique insights to bring to the show.
Do you know, by the way, just folks will be listening to us in the morning on this podcast, what is Westwood One? I would assume that's 105.3 here in Dallas. Is it? You think that's where that game will be heard if people want to kind of check out some of your sideline work?
I guess I would just look up, Google Westwood One in Dallas and find out
okay.
Where exactly. And we appeal to a market beyond Dallas. I think we have a lot of Philadelphia listeners, so hopefully it's broad enough across the NFL that people know to what their Westwood One local affiliate is, and they can hear me on the broadcast should they so desire, not to listen to Rex Ryan and Beth Mounds.
Yeah. Well, that's.
Although I'm not saying you shouldn't want to do that. I'm just saying.
Well, that's a groundbreaking. That's a groundbreaking deal with Beth Mounds doing that ball game. But the guy you're working with, by the way, Harlan, is just one of my favorites. He's unbelievable.
Kevin Harlan and Kurt Warner.
Yeah, but I'm telling you, Harlan. We used to have him on our radio show, Talk NBA. But he is so good on NFL and NBA, and he just truly, he may be. He's sort of Marv Albert's kind of moving toward retirement probably in the next couple of years. Harlan's kind of the heir apparent. Like he's got that kind of voice.
I'll just say that I've worked with a lot of legends in my career, at ESPN with Chris Berman and, Trey Wingo and Susie Colbert. So, you can ask any of them. They'd tell you that.
That's right. Wingo.
Especially Wingo.
Susie's actually pretty humble, but yeah.
Wingo might dispute the other two, but he would admit that he's in that class.
Oh, certainly. He thought he was in that class.
He desperately wants to be a guest on our show too, or he did before I said that.
Yeah, he hasn't been tweeting us out as much as I think he should. So I'm gonna, until he kind of gets back on that, I'm gonna hold off on asking him to be a guest.
Okay.
Hey, buddy, appreciate it, and have a great call tomorrow night. We'll be listening. We're proud of you, and just represent. All I ask is that just once during the game, you go, we talked about this on Doomsday last night. Just the Doomsday Podcast. Work it in somehow.
How many times?
Just once is fine.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we talked about this on the Doomsday Podcast with my buddy Matt Mosley. By the way, the new podcast with Brent Musburger featured in the Saturday Barry Horn media column. So I wanted you to know that. Yeah.
Just and just so I know, will you be listening to the entire broadcast to make sure that I honor that obligation?
No, I can't do that. But I would just prefer a heads up from you when you think might do it.
If you're not going to listen to the whole broadcast to hold me accountable, I promise you I'll do it.
All right, man. Hope all is well. If you are in the Denver area, stop by the JW, say hi to Ed. All right, good night, Ed.
Good night, Ed.
Lights are shining, stockings have been hung. You're praying for your daughter, lighting candles for your son. They're living in the city now, you don't see them anymore. This year will not be like the ones before. And the streets are all but empty, the bars have all shut down, and it's hard to find a friend inside this godforsaken town. That emptiness, it feels from your head down to your toes. I'm sorry, baby, that's just the way it goes. Once you were a young girl with lovers by the score, money by the handful, you never wanted more.
Hey, it's Mark Goodman.
And I'm Alan Light.
On today's podcast, Record Store Day founder Carrie Colleton is joining us to discuss the April 20th RSD special releases.
Plus, we'll talk live with our audience, the Sound Up Pod Squad, and find out who still listens to vinyl. And some updates from the Beatles universe.
Oh, good. Sound Up with Mark Goodman and Alan Light, the only music podcast that matters. Get it on Pandora, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.